Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
We welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Friday, August the 6th. I'm Gary Stevens. It is the first Friday of the month, so this 10:30 segment, we spotlight the Community Foundation of the Holland, Zeeland area, and we are very pleased to once again having to rejoin us from his offices is the president of the Community Foundation of the Holland, Zeeland area via the Zoom connection, Mike Goorhouse. Mike, good morning and welcome back to WHTC.
Good morning, Gary. Good to be here.
Glad you are with us. If you have a question about anything that the CFHZ is doing, Mike will be happy to answer it at 616-395-1450. Final round of Community Stabilization Fund grants have been released. When we say final round, is it final, or let's just hope we don't need to do this again, but you never know.
Well, you went there, Gary. We certainly, when we did set out to do our COVID response, we did an initial first 9-week emergency response. Then we thought was going to be a 6-month stabilization response that turned into being a year. So we did a 6-month and another 6-month. And so when we said this was our final round, we believe that. Now, as we all know, the last week or two has been a little bit unsettling on some fronts, but we are hopeful, Gary, and I would say for 2 reasons. So one, the reality is a lot of the federal and state dollars that have been approved as part of the COVID response are now making their way through the system. So if people kind of take a step back and think about March of 2020, and you think about the role of private philanthropy as it relates to response to a pandemic like this, and the role of public government, the reality was private philanthropy can respond much more quickly. And even though the federal government was signing big checks with lots of zeros and a lot of people got stimulus checks and other things, much of the billions and trillions of dollars that the government approved in those various bills takes time to make it through the system. We are just now seeing some of those things make it on the ground into communities. So we have watched that and said, okay, there's a lot of resources that are coming into our community through the various CARES Act, through the state and other places. And so not that there's not a continued role for private philanthropy, but we do believe this was the final round for us, the Stabilization Fund, because those other resources are making their way into our community.
You were talking about the fact that, some of the federal dollars are finally getting around. That's been one of the biggest complaints is the fact that a lot of the allocated money, or shall we say money that was in all these CARES Acts and the other America Family Act and all these other things, was bogged down by governmental red tape. The Small Business Administration in Washington was getting a lot of the heat because much of the money had not been doled out by them. And, granted, this maybe doesn't concern the Community Foundation, Mike, but yet, the frustration by some of these businesses, especially, in getting some of these funds, like, what are we going to do with all this red tape?
Yeah, Gary, it really is a complicated question that, like you said, is not my area of expertise, but I will give a quick opinion on it. I think what's interesting and challenging, and this is why I think private philanthropy plays a really meaningful role in response, is if you're a governmental unit and you start a new program, like many of these things were, and they get up and running, we appropriately will criticize the speed at which government works and want the things to move more quickly. But we also know plenty of examples. If government moves too quickly, we like to criticize them for not putting together an efficient program with too many gaps and opportunities for abuse and other kinds of things, right? I mean, even the unemployment insurance, right? I mean, you look back now and you hear about some of these scams that people were taking advantage of the program. So I don't envy the federal and state folks, because I think it's kind of a lose-lose, right? You're either not fast enough in responding to the moment, or you might be too fast and the program wasn't all tidied up and tied nicely in a bow, and then you can get criticized for that. So I don't know which they were. Too slow or too fast, maybe some of both. I don't really know, but I will say that I say all that because I do think in a moment like this, I think there's a role for private giving and philanthropy. There's a role for government too. I'm not saying that there's not, but I think that's a perfect case where I think local community giving on the ground where we can respond very quickly and efficiently at the same time. I mean, the Community Foundation prides itself in the last 18 months. We have been in constant communication with our nonprofits who are communicating with families and individuals on the ground, our local schools and other kinds of things. So we have a much more intimate, real-time knowledge of how things are going and can deploy dollars very quickly in ways that the government just isn't equipped to do. And so I do think this is an example where we needed both responses, but private giving. When people say, well, the government's taking care of that, I would argue that there's a role for private giving to do some of this response even more effectively. And again, like we said, some of these programs are now just coming now. It's a year and a half later. Some of this private giving needed to happen much sooner than waiting a year or a year and a half.
If you got a question for Mike Goorhouse from the Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland Area, he'll be happy to answer it at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. These community stabilization funds, both private and public entities were on the receiving end of these funds, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So this last round, getting to kind of how we use these last dollars, the final round was just over $100,000 in grants. It was really kind of tying up a bow on a $1 million+ fund, $1 million two. And so where we were looking at were some of the gaps that over the course of our distribution over the previous 11 months, where were the opportunities that we needed to kind of finalize with these 100,000. So I'll just share a few with listeners. So one was a $25,000 grant to the Momentum Center, which is an organization out of Grand Haven, to start doing some work on the north side of Holland out of the Boys and Girls Club there. And the Momentum Center is a well-known player in the north part of our county that hasn't done a lot of work in the south part of the county yet, but has a good reputation for specifically working with adults and older young people with mental illness and addiction. And so
let me just real quick, speaking of the Momentum Center, if people want to know more about that, R. Scott Watson has had a chance to chat on a few occasions with Barbara Lee Van Horsen with the Momentum Center. And I will refer our listeners to go to our webpage at WHTC.com in the podcast tab under Hearing Voices, and Scott has put up the podcast he has had in the past with Barbara Lee Van Horsen from the Momentum Center to be able to let them know a little bit more of what they are doing.
Perfect. Great example. Yep. So we gave a $20,000 grant to kind of bring some of that work to the Northside Boys and Girls Club. We also spent some more resources on mental health and addiction. So $15,000 to Mosaic Counseling. They have just seen a real high volume requests for their counseling services. So to help them continue to keep up with that high volume of intake requests. Catholic Charities of West Michigan, we gave $10,000 towards a new detoxification treatment center that they've actually opened in West Michigan. And this is specifically for individuals to support them on their recovery journey from addiction and substance abuse. And so there's a new center. It's actually located in Muskegon called the Kobe Detox Center. But we supported the effort with $10,000 to make sure that Holland Zeeland residents who were uninsured and underinsured had access to those to that specific treatment to recover from addiction. We also gave.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
We also gave $8,400 to Midtown Counseling to continue their counseling efforts with the schools in the summer months. They provide counseling specifically to young people, and during the summer months, we wanted to make sure those services were still available to those young people. That part focused on the mental health addiction side. A good chunk of this 100,000 went there, but there were a couple other education plays that we made this summer. $15,000 to Ready for School for their kindergarten readiness camp, which is a summer 4-week 80-hour intensive program for young people who are about to enter kindergarten. Partners with Holland, West Ottawa, Zeeland, and helping make sure kids are ready for kindergarten so they can start on a good note with their education. Also $10,000 to the Bridge Youth Ministry Center in Zeeland to provide academic support through the summer for young people that fell behind in their schooling during this last year. The Bridge Youth Ministry Center is a really trusted place in Muskegon, a great partner of the Zeeland Public Schools, and so wanted to make sure they were still offering services to students throughout the summer. Last two, to Lighthouse Immigrant Advocates, $15,000 for remote renewal services. We noticed that there was a particular gap in the financial stability side of things for individuals that needed to keep up their current immigration status in order to keep a job. And that's an area of expertise of Lighthouse Immigrant Advocates. And with all the various challenges of in-person, they now do remote renewal services. And so we help provide the resources so they could do remote renewal services for folks' green cards and the other various certifications they need to be able to work here in the Holland Zeeland area. And the last one was $5,000 to Solid Rock Ministries, and it's a very acute need. It's focused on individuals with a high financial need who are in a home that needs some sort of emergency repair. So oftentimes something happens and their options are either this has to get fixed right now, or we have to leave this home because it is unsafe. And if you're someone who doesn't have a lot in your savings, unfortunately, that can lead to you having to choose to leave. And that isn't what we want. If it's an emergency fix that can be done with $500 or $1,000, we'd much rather keep someone in their home than have to have them move when it's an emergency case. So Solid Rock Ministries has done some of this work in the past, and we helped add to their pot of resources $5,000 so they could continue to serve probably another 10 to 5 to 10 homes. It's that kind of range of emergency repair that they come in and help with. But that's another 5 or 10 families able to stay in their home versus having to try to find somewhere else to go. And if anyone's tried to find a place to live in the last year, finding another place, particularly an affordable place, is quite challenging. So Gary, that kind of rounded out what is a much broader, over $1 million stabilization fund, but tried to pick a few things here and there. You saw a little bit on the mental health, addiction side of things, a little bit with summer education, and then a few more specific instances on the financial stability, which were our three focus areas. Our three focus areas were financial stability, education, and mental health and addiction. Those were the three focus areas for the whole fund. About half of the total dollars from the fund went towards financial stability. And then the rest was divided fairly evenly between mental health and education. So about a quarter to each of those, and then half to financial stability when you take the whole $1 million+ into account.
Good morning. You're on the line with Mike Goorhouse.
Good morning. You hand out quite a bit of money, and I'm wondering if you have any follow-up or evaluation. For example, I had a friend that whose daughter was suicided and actually made some attempts, and I tried to contact that Be Nice, and I wrote them a letter and didn't hear anything for 3 weeks. And it wasn't until I had rather a terse letter to them that I get a follow-up. So you get these organizations, it sounds good, the money goes out, but what kind of follow-up, and are they doing the job that they say they're doing?
All right, we'll get the response from Mike on that. Thank you very much for the call, Mike.
Yeah, so to answer the specific question about follow-up and evaluation, we do follow-up and evaluation. We actually are just finalizing a follow-up report, evaluation report on our stabilization fund grantees. This latest round, they just got the resources not that long ago, but many folks got funds in 2020. And so we have a report that we're finalizing on how those dollars were used. We also do evaluation of our regular grantees. So our COVID response was a much more kind of rapid emergency response, but our other grant rounds are kind of longer. We spend months working with nonprofits before making decisions about a program, and so we do evaluation and follow up. I would say in general, we have a high success rate of organizations delivering on what they say they're going to do, but it's not perfect. Like anything, we do on occasion have grantees that aren't able to deliver on what the expectation was for the dollars that we give them. So I don't want to pretend otherwise. So there are cases where that happens. Your specific example, I appreciate you naming that, and something that I'll take to heart and we'll do some thinking about. We have supported the Be Nice program in the past. We also support Mosaic Counseling. So for others listening, I would say if there's a specific emergency or even just a very specific mental health need, Mosaic Counseling would be the place I would probably encourage to call first, as they are the one that provides services. Be Nice doesn't provide specific counseling services to individuals. Be Nice is an awareness and education campaign amongst schools and businesses to encourage people to identify where someone might have a mental health need and then direct them to services. So that may sound a little bit nuanced, but Be Nice would be an education platform to raise awareness around mental health. Mosaic would be the place that you would actually get services. So I just want to name that, not because your comment was incorrect to the caller, but I wanted to make sure that the individual you're talking about does get access to services. So I would encourage a phone call to Mosaic Counseling. But I do appreciate the feedback about Be Nice and the question overall. Evaluation is very important.
One final thing, Mike, because we only have about a minute and a half to go. Coming up on September the 9th, the Celebration of Philanthropy, a reason to celebrate event. Tell us a little bit about what's coming up on the 9th.
Yeah, so on Thursday, September 9, we are going to lift up, honor, and celebrate the nonprofits in our community that responded so well to the COVID pandemic. So it's an evening event out at the Emmy Yacht boat shed on the north side of town. It is a ticketed event. There's details on the foundation's website where you can sign up and register if you're interested in attending. Our website is www.cfhz.org, as in Community Foundation Holland, Zeeland.org. And it's going to be a great night. We look forward to celebrating both nonprofits, but donors and others that really stepped up to help our community respond. And that will be the nature of it. It is a fundraising event, but there's not a fundraising activity at the event. There's a ticket price to get in. That's the fundraising piece. But really, it's meant to be a celebration of this community coming together. So look forward to anyone who can join us on Thursday, September 9. Details on our website. Should be a really celebratory and meaningful night.
Yes, again, it's the Celebration of Philanthropy, a reason to celebrate. It's Thursday, September the 9th. And again, more information at the Community Foundation's website. We will put a link to the website. We'll put the description of our podcast with Mike Goorhouse on our webpage at WHTC.com in a few minutes. Mike, I know there's a few other things I want to touch base with you on, but we really are running short of time, so I will hold off on that. A couple of things that I will sort of tease people about besides the Celebration of Philanthropy. We'll talk about maybe getting back to some of the other events, some of the other things that the Community Foundation has done on a more regular basis before we had the COVID-19 situation come with us, the quarterly donations, the gifts, the grants that have given by the CFHZ. And also, we'll also talk about how CFHZ has been trying to strengthen the nonprofit sector. But again, those conversations will have to be for next month. Mike Goorhouse, we're out of time this month, but we appreciate the time you spent with us. Wish you and everybody at the CFHZ well over the next month or so. We'll talk again in September.
Great. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much, Mike Goorhouse on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.